Hello, hello, beautiful visionaries. Welcome to the Plant Spirit Summit. I'm your host, Lorna Liana. In this series, we'll be exploring the intersection between ancestral plant spirit healing and psychedelic medicine, asking the question, can psychedelics heal the world? The name of today's panel is called Guided Microdosing in Community, Methods, Training, and Results. In this session, you'll get to know the work of the International Microdosing Association, IMA, an initiative from Dr. James Fadiman that unites microdosing professionals to co-create solutions, develop open source science, and promote collaboration over competition with microdosers first in mind. Today, we're going to discuss the evolution of microdosing, the intention of the International Microdosing Association, as well as microdosing methods and models. In order to deepen your inquiry into this topic, we invite you to download the Handbook for Advocates and Culture Creators. That's also called Can Psychedelics Heal the World? In order to learn more about the topics being discussed and to answer some of the self-reflection questions provided in the back. The entire program schedule is also indicated in the beginning of the handbook. The Plant Spirit Summit is sponsored by our amazing sponsors, Waking Herbs, the Soul Vine, and the Plant Spirit School Integration Coach Certification Program. Today, I am really excited to bring to you Dr. James Fadiman, who has been involved in psychedelic research since the 1960s and has spent the last 10 years uncovering and researching the multiple uses of microdosing. His books, The Psychedelic Explorer's Guide and Your Symphony of Selves, are written in part to help individuals benefit from careful, guided experiences and aid them with successful integration and self-understanding. Considered the father of modern-day microdosing, he is the initiator and founding member of the International Microdosing Association. He continues to research and consult about safe, low-cost, high-benefit uses of psychedelics and related substances, and is currently writing a book about microdosing, its history, and its applications.
Hello.
Jacobien van de Weyden is a microdosing educator, holistic coach, psychedelic guide, and co-founder of Microdosing Institute. She's been in service of the psychedelic renaissance since 2003, holding different roles at nonprofit organizations and companies before creating Microdosing Institute as a platform for education, coaching, community, and research in 2017. Alvaro Zarate is the co-founder of Microhuasca, a Peruvian social organization developing programs and protocols for ayahuasca, microdosers and microdosing professionals, and Cosmovision.
Hola, hello.
Perfect.
Amazing, great, thank you so much. All right, so before we get started into this fascinating topic about guided microdosing, I would love it if you might share your origin stories of how you got involved in microdosing research and also coaching support and decided to focus in this specific area of the psychedelic movement. Jim, would you like to get started?
Sure. About 11 years ago, my friend Robert Fort, who also one of the major discoverers and developers of MMDA, had lunch with me and told me that Albert Hoffman took very low doses and would go for walks in the woods to think. And the idea of low doses had zero interest for me, but I'm a very curious guy, so I started to ask around and ask people would they be interested in low doses. People liked them, and it exploded really from there.
All right, Alvaro, how did you get started?
Well, I'm Peruvian, so here we breathe ayahuasca. And before this, I was in the startup world. Actually, was building a lot of, the startup incubators, or they call it accelerators. And then after having ayahuasca a couple of times, I discovered the big opportunity of of healing that this plant gives. And actually, it was a little unbalanced because I was in the accelerator, let's say, space for 10 years. And now the plant tells me, hey, you need to deaccelerate. So I'm currently now in a very, let's say, in a path to get to know the plant better. And actually here in Peru, we have the opportunity of, since ayahuasca is not illegal, we are launching a couple of initiatives like microdosing and some others to the world, and now exploring it with many people around the world.
Thank you so much. Jacobine, would you share what inspired you to specialize in microdosing?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm from Amsterdam, the Netherlands. And so we luckily always had legal access to psychedelics. Earlier on, magic mushrooms, now those are magic truffles, and also a range of other herbs and seeds and so on. And cannabis, of course. But for some reason, I was never too interested in it. But paradoxically, I ended up working for a company that sells those products. So, of course, I was curious and started experimenting with it, initially really from a recreational point of view. But as soon as I got into somewhat higher doses, I got really, really intrigued by the power of the mind. And actually, I was still very much a left brain side person, was very much in their head. And actually, the psychedelics, the plant medicines taught me how to feel and how to really go inward and explore my inner world, not just from a cognitive perspective. Yeah, and so in 2016, we were actually, I met the other co-founder of the Microdosing Institute. We both realized like, hey, we are in the Netherlands with all these legal psychedelics and people are not afraid to try it and explore. But for some reason, there is no information, almost no information available except for one other platform in the United States. So let's bring it closer to us. And we also felt like we need a community. We want people to exchange information and share their stories and their experiences, because there's so much to learn and so much that we don't know yet. And that's also where we started to connect with Jim and with other researchers to ask like, hey, aren't you looking into microdosing? And they said, no, what should we look at? So that's how all those conversations actually started. Yeah, and the community has been growing from there to thousands of people and became global as well. So yeah, here we are.
Amazing. So Jacobine, would you be able to explain what the International Microdosing Association is and what is the intention of the organization?
Yeah, so I actually want to start by saying that this was also Jim's idea or vision. I think several times he mentioned in our conversations that it would be so great to bring all the coaches together, maybe somewhere online, maybe somewhere on Facebook. We brainstormed about that, so that actually as professionals, we can also collectively figure things out. I think that was one of the initial reasons. And now today we are at this moment, and actually this is a celebratory moment because we're launching the IMA, the International Microdosing Association, officially. Actually tomorrow, because tomorrow is Jim's birthday, and it's also World Microdosing Day, where, so this is where the day that we each year invite everybody to share their stories. And it's also a day where we honor the pioneers. So that's both Jim, other researchers, other important people, but also the ancestral indigenous teachers that we all, built upon, who started this way before we did. And also where we hopefully with those conversations and those story sharings inspire also science to evolve further and to increase our collective knowledge. So this is all like the underlying, this is all the underlying idea. And early in this year, we got together with Alvaro, with Microwaska and their team and the team at Microdosing Institute. And we actually started with what would be our North Star here? What is it that we're all aiming? What is it that we're all trying to do as microdosing coaches, as facilitators, as citizen scientists, as researchers? And actually, what we want is that people have successful microdosing processes. So we started to have a conversation around what is that, a successful microdosing process? And this is actually what we also will be talking about more today. And this is also what we thought we need to determine that within community, as a community. So the IMA is a community platform. It's decentralized for everyone who identifies as a microdosing professional. So it doesn't matter in what capacity, or if you're an aspiring microdosing coach, or a therapist, or a researcher, or an entrepreneur, doesn't matter. We just see a lot of value in having this platform where we can all have conversations and co-creations to actually really evolve this field further. And I don't know, Alvaro, maybe there's something you'd like to add to this definition.
We discuss a lot about what is a successful microdosing process, right? We might all have different definitions, but at the end, we all converge in people should benefit from it, right? And sometimes we need a North Star to see how our actions should be done, how should we prioritize our time and our efforts, right? So it was very interesting because we started, I think some months ago, we had a first meeting with a smaller group in the IMA when we were just forming, and we started asking about what are the needs, not just for users, for microdosers, but what are the needs for microdosing professionals like coaches or therapists, researchers. And we arrived to a couple of items, and also we discovered that there's a lot of potential in collaborating. So we see collaboration over competition. So it makes a lot of things easier, and we have a lot of experiences of IMA members collaborating among themselves with each other. Actually, one of our first experiments was Microwaska and Microdosing Institute. We both we worked in creating a microdosing program. Now Microwaska is helping others, especially in the Latin America and microdosing space, create their own programs. People help each other. So we don't care if we have a lot of programs similar to us. We're actually happy because at the end, what we want are more people achieving more successful microdosing processes. And I think this can reframe a lot of the current efforts in the space. So as we know, I don't know if it's sadly the psychedelic space in general has been born within the pharmaceutical sector, right? And this has many other indicators such as financials and other stuff. But I think that at heart, at least people who are now in the IMA, we strive for this purpose, the successful microdosing process. And now even within the IMA, we are building co-creation projects within IMA, for example, networking projects, legal projects, data and citizen science projects, which we will talk about later as well.
So what, in a funny way, we're a brand new 6,000-year-old group, because what we're doing is taking from what we have learned from both ancient history and from indigenous people now of how they've been using microdoses and how they help each other. We're also coming into existence in the middle of what's been called the kind of psychedelic renaissance, which has spawned, whether it's for benefit or not, over 100 companies who are trying to profit from the space. And we're kind of the other group. We're the people who say hiding knowledge in order to profit personally just isn't the way psychedelics have taught us to be. So what we're looking for is how can we not only cooperate in a conventional sense, but how can we share our mistakes so only one group has to make each one, and sharing our successes as well. So this is an unusual organization. It's unusual in the way it's being put together and its intention and the context in which it comes. So that on your screen, on these little matchbooks that we all are, we represent an enormous range of successful experiences for other people. And we also own probably, between us, as many mistakes as many people can acquire in many years of work. So that's what we're doing. And this is the kind of the prequel to tomorrow when we come into official existence. So you are now kind of going behind the curtain where the Wizard of Oz is pretending that he's pretentious, and learning who we are and what we're doing, and why it felt absolutely central to set up an international supportive organization.
So is it like a social network? How would people interact with each other through the website so that there would be this cross-border collaboration in a decentralized way?
Mm-hmm. So we've been exploring this. Some of you might heard this movement about DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations. So we are working. Our platform right now is Discord. So it's like a forum, an online forum, online chat. And some of the things that we have been doing was first fostering and dynamizing the community with discussions. So we have small events. We discuss within Discord, right? And these discussions, most of the time, bring up needs. What are the needs for microdosers? What are the needs for microdosing professionals? And how we work is, okay, since we all have these needs, we should co-create solutions and not big, complicated solutions. We usually think about this minimum viable product concept, right? We as the less effort and the less resource we can expend to have a minimum solution that works for many. For example, some of the projects we are launching and working on, we saw the need for networking. A lot of professionals, microdosing professionals, feel alone. They have similar needs, and they find in these events that, hey, you have these needs as well. Let's exchange methods and let's work together. So now we are co-creating a professionals directory, so all microdosers can network with each other. We had a legal discussion as well. So it brought up a lot of needs in countries where psychedelics are not legal. So we started talking about, hey, but what if we co-create a project where people from these countries can work with people from Peru or from the Netherlands, where some of these substances are legal? So we started exploring these kind of alliances and partnerships. And one of the latest projects, and Jim likes this a lot, is the Citizen Science Lab. So Jim talks a lot about citizen science. So let's make research useful. And as practitioners, a lot of our members are practitioners, say coaches, facilitators, therapists, and such. They have a lot of patients, a lot of users, and some of them want to, hey, I want to collect data, but I don't know why or how. Sorry, or I have a lot of patients, and I don't know. I see some patterns, but I cannot make anything up from this. So we started thinking, okay, since you are already working on this, how about we create a general framework where we can all collect data collectively, when we can all analyze data collectively, and data not for convincing policymakers or regulators or investors and such, but actually to achieve successful microdosing processes. So this data should be as immediately useful as possible for users of microdosers or facilitators to have a successful process, whatever that is in each case. So we are just starting with this. So if anyone here is a practitioner or wants or likes data, we welcome you with open arms. And maybe Jim, you can tell us about your love for citizen science, and now what we call we are trying to reframe that scientific researchers can become scientific creators, because we are actually creating stuff useful stuff for others.
Yeah, there's we're not doing as much research as we are doing search. Search is when you actually don't know quite how to do what you're doing or what you're going to find. Research is often proving something that you think might be so. Right now, and also the sharing of information helps people very quickly. Let me just give you an example. Let us say that someone comes to me and says, I have had migraine headaches for 15 years. I've taken all the medications that my Western medicine has given me. Would microdosing be helpful? Now, I have a few cases that I know of over the years of people with migraines, but this is the kind of question I can put to the huge knowledge base that we already are in the International Microdosing Association. And I can probably get 4 or 5 different people who've worked with people with migraines using different substances in different protocols overnight, so that I can use that before we're not interested in much as in publishing as in helping. And that's really a very different model. And we accumulate data as we go, and the more researchy numbers of us do with that what researchers do. But we're all coming from helping people first. What do we need to do that? And how can we help each other do a better job? So it's, in a sense, a very simple model, rather than coming from science or brain chemistry. All of those are wonderful things, and other people are doing them.
Jim, you've been doing microdosing research for a long time. I imagine you've accumulated a lot of anecdotal stories, but I'm still curious to know, like, in all the time that you've been researching this fascinating topic, how has it evolved? What do you find remarkable about how plant medicine and microdosing spaces are evolving today versus in the past?
Well, when I started, there was nothing, so everything was exciting. But what you're really, well, here's an amazing shift in the microdosing world, and you're seeing it right now. The idea that there is a growing profession of people who are coaching. Remember, not being, not controlling, not kind of setting up the parameters, but helping people define what's the best way for them. Very much what coaching is about. If you coach an athlete, they don't all run the same. Each one is coached to do the best they can with the body they have. So that whole creation of a new profession in the healing arts, closer to a shaman than to a physician, is one of the most remarkable shifts I've ever seen. When I began, my instructions were take a little bit, don't do it too often, and take some time off. Now, that's actually central to the coaching model, but we didn't have anything but that. So it was to prevent people harming themselves. And it was also preventing people from imagining that a microdose was like a little teeny great big dose. Kind of that here's your volcano of high doses. Here's a little volcano. That's just not true. This is a different stratum of consciousness, and a whole different set of conditions, which microdosing works with very well, that high doses don't work with at all. So we're really into a discovery mode, We don't have a lot of the high dose world is not a good role model. And so we're creating not only new areas in which microdosing is valuable, but new ways in which people can help each other. And what we are here is very different models of coaching are on this screen right now. And we're beginning to kind of blend, what's the best of each. Again, rather than, why don't we do it my way? Which is unfortunately what I've found in the world of psychology, much more predominant. In psychology, there's like 200 kinds of therapy. And every once in a while, there's this sad little article that says, can't we agree on something? We're doing it the other way. So far, so good.
So when you say different approaches, are you saying different approaches to coaching with commonly used microdosing protocols? Or are you saying that even the protocols for microdosing are also evolving? So, I think there's I know of like two main protocols, like the Fadiman protocol, your protocol, and then the Stamets stack or the but like I'm those are like the only two in my mind. So I'd love to know like if the cadence of taking your microdoses is also being explored.
Well, before we turn it over to the people who actually should answer that, the reason there are separate protocols is because we're in the exploration stage. And what we notice and there are a lot of other protocols by now. By the way, there's a nicer word than protocol. It's called schedule. It's a little easier on everybody, which is protocols are very often, how often do you take it? Okay. Sometimes it's what time of day. We then get very fancy. But what we're finding is, where should an individual find the correct protocol? That's different from the coach deciding on the protocol, okay? When you go into a store and you want to buy a shirt, I've been a clothes salesman in little stores, and it turns out clothes people, the salespeople can sell most anything to anybody. It's really disheartening. You can sell people things that don't fit, that are wrong for them, if you want to get rid of them and get rid of your stock, okay? That's not the model we're looking at. We're not also the model that says, I have created a protocol, you will follow it. Rather is, here's some protocols. Let's see what works for you. Let's experiment until we get something that you find ideal. And it may be very different than anything I've ever done with anyone else. So let me turn that over to Jacobin in terms of the question of different methods and different models and different protocols.
Yeah, thank you. I believe also I actually use the word protocol a lot, but yeah, protocol and dosing and the schedule, it all falls under this building a relationship with the plant medicine, and that is your personal relationship with the plant, and that is actually one of the key elements in what we believe is efficient coaching. People really, we are all different. We all have a different sensitivity, and we all interact slightly differently with our microdoses. So what is a microdose for one person is actually a mini dose or something, that causes an altered state, or that just takes them off guard too much for your normal day-to-day activities. So everybody is going to try, in our coachings, everybody's trying out different doses and calibrates really carefully, and then monitors their own experience based on a number of elements. And so those are like elements that fall into the physical dimension, the emotional dimension, the cognitive dimension, and the spiritual dimension. And over a certain amount of time, people track all of this and they start to observe. So you become a much better observer. And this is all what we believe is really essential when it comes to, achieving a successful microdosing process. This is really where it all starts. Two other things that I also would like to mention here. The first one is actually your intention. So just like with a high dose journey or a ceremony, it is intentional work, and it sits within your life. Like, where are you standing now? Where are you coming from? What have you been through? What are you looking for in life? What are your needs? So what are you actually aiming for? And what are you asking guidance for from these plans? So that is your intention. So we want to kind of know what is our destination, in which direction are we heading. So we work a lot with intention. And we also believe that the more someone is able to actually give voice, vocalize what they want and what they need, and also combine this with their observations as they've done their tracking and they're building this relationship with the plant, all of the benefits and challenges that they are coming across in that process can be linked to that intention. So is this bringing me closer to my intention, or is it taking me further away? Or is this throwing me back into my old ways of being and doing that I actually want to transform here? So this is where all the insight and the awareness comes from. And this is why we also believe that microdosing can be, just as powerful or even more powerful and sustainable than high dose medicine work. And the third thing I wanted to say here, which I think is really important, is what sort of mindset are you approaching microdosing with? So unfortunately, in today's world, we still see a lot of people who approach it as a medicine, as a fix. So they come to us and say, I have this or this issue, you name it, whatever, pain, headaches, deficiencies of something, or depression, anxiety, OCD. And they say, what is the best substance? Or what is the protocol that I should use? And we hope that actually over time with the citizen science, we get some more clarity on that. And we already have some indications. But in general, it's about how do you approach it, because it's not going to fix that problem that you brought up. It is not going to fix that automatically. So there is a dialogue. This is the process, and it requires commitment. It requires the right type of expectations and around what is it to work with plant medicine and to build that relationship, and what can I actually get out of it, but also what does it take from me to engage in that process. So mindset and attitude are also really important. And I don't know if we have more time to go into this topic, because in total, together with Microwaska, we have identified 50 elements in total that we call them the integration elements. And those 50 elements have impact on people's processes. So let me just pause there for a second.
So if you ask me how have things changed, I'd say I started with no processes, and now we have 50. So there's just a deeper understanding as we've come along, and we're talking about, all of us here are talking of thousands of cases. This is not invention medicine. This is, and really coming into relationship with a plant or a fungus or fungi is a different model. And it's one which is much older than either Eastern or Western medicine. And there's a reason for it. So we are rediscovering and reworking for contemporary life the oldest of models.
Thank you. So what are people microdosing these days?
Did you say where or how?
What?
Oh, what are they microdosing?
Yes, like what are the most popular microdosing medicines?
Well, it depends on what country, of course, you're in. Remember, the United States not only has made psychedelics illegal, but they have a wonderful add-on called the Analog Act, which is if someone invents a new substance that looks to them like an old substance, it is illegal before it ever is used. In fact, there are things that are illegal under the United States law that don't even exist, which is a remarkable feat of legislation. So why don't we hear from some of the saner countries about that question? What are people using?
Well, okay, so Alvaro, you're in a country where ayahuasca is legal. Tell me about what microdosing ayahuasca looks like. Is it is it just the pure vine that is what is being microdosed, or is it the traditional brew with the ayahuasca and the chacruna that is more popular?
It's the great question. So when we started microdosing ayahuasca plus chacruna, the full brew. We know that chacruna contains DMT, but actually some ancient way of doing it, because microdosing ayahuasca has been going on for hundreds of years. We have been talking to indigenous leaders and such, and they know, and some of the people, this is a very niche knowledge, but the capi vine works the same. And we actually have experimented microdosing with chacruna, without chacruna, and it's very similar, right? And the good thing for some that are not in Peru is that in some places, not all, the capi vine is not illegal. And we don't want to promote this very much because, as you know, some of you know, ayahuasca takes 10 years to grow. So there has to be a sustainability plan behind this. I always say, if you take ayahuasca, we should in some way give back to the land and grow more ayahuasca. But going back to the question, so we have been seeing similar results with or without chacruna, and the indigenous and traditional healers, when they recommend microdosing ayahuasca to their patients, the ones who know, they tell people, hey, just use the ayahuasca vine. So, and this pops up a lot of questions in regards of, but if the vine doesn't have DMT, is this a psychedelic? Some healers say that the healing is in the vine and the colors are in the chacruna leaves. There are many different points of view. But what I actually want to say is that with Jacoby and Jim, we have been talking about this thing that we call it demystifying the substance. I don't know if it's a good way to put it, but at the end of the day, people, I think, they care too much about which substance to use, is this better? And they care a lot about stacking, how can I make the best brews for me? But at least personally, I think that they care a lot about the external stuff because it's easier to try to make the best mix and not working on yourself. So in these 50 integration elements, the substance is one of all the elements that can impact your microdosing process. Actually, we have 18 elements we call elements of result. For example, your mood, your sleep quality. So these are things that get impacted by different elements. And the substance and other elements we have 32 elements. For example, the intention, which Jacobin mentioned, the schedule, the dosing, the amount of the microdosing substance, the relationship with the plant. Jackie also told about commitment, expectations, openness. So there are many things that actually are internal. In this case, there are many internal elements that you should be able to navigate. And when you microdose, you face many challenges. For example, something very interesting that in microhuasca is one of our elements is the element of dieta. Because as you know, in ayahuasca and ceremonies, you follow a specific dieta, which is you restrict yourself from, nutrition-wise, some food, other substances like medicines or supplements and other things. So actually, we have one of our co-founders is a traditional curandero, and he created this dieta protocol. Let's use protocol for the sake of the argument for microdosing. So, and we are actually trying this dieta, and it's not just dieta for things that you eat, but also the energy dieta, the sexuality, the situations you are in. So all of these are integration elements. So it's very interesting to see how this sorts out, how you can navigate this. And actually, our practitioners, we created a tool called the Integration Navigator. So our microayahuasca practitioners actually follow up and track every week a lot of these elements for every user, and that's why we have a lot of data, and we are using this like as a framework, right? So going back to the original question, substance is important. Substance can have different, of course, you can have psilocybin or ayahuasca, and you will feel they will work differently in your body. But at the end of the day, they are spirits as well. They help you go deep into what you need to work, but the actual work is within you. So what I personally would like to say is, okay, let's take care of the substance, but let's also see the other 32 things that beyond biologicals can impact your process and take care of them.
So we're
sorry, continue.
So just it really is important to keep in mind that we're moving away from the psychopharmacological model, which is nothing matters but the substance. There is no set and setting. There's nothing about your personality or your condition, just the chemicals in the substance and where in the body they go. Now, when you're hearing what you just heard, you're hearing what sophistication looks like versus a kind of profit-minded simplicity. So that people who microdose and get real support, it's a serious business. It's about improving your life. It's not about fixing one little part of you that's wrong. And since the problem with most medications is they suppress rather than cure. And that's, again, a huge shift, which is a successful microdosing is not when you don't have the symptom. Successful microdosing is when your system no longer needs to have that symptom basically to harm itself. So you're improving the body, mind, spirit, and that's simply again, that's the older model. It's much more comprehensive. And it certainly, going back to the earlier question, it's certainly an amazing surprise to me how much we now know about that nest of variables that all of us walk around in.
There have been some recent studies that suggest that microdosing is a placebo effect. I'm curious to know what your thoughts are.
Well,
Jim, do you have any?
I will try not to use any words that will be beeped out. And there are a number of those studies that have shown that what's fascinating is, given what you hear around here with thousands of people improved in many, many ways, how can you design a study which somehow won't show any of that? And that is a skill. And what turns out among the things you use, you try and get all healthy people so that there is very little change in their activity. If you're selling a weight loss supplement and you only have as your subjects people who are absolutely at their best weight, it's not going to go very well because that isn't who it's for. So you start with very healthy subjects, most of whom have already had psychedelics and already microdosed, because the internal review boards of these institutions say, well, you don't want to make a bunch of zombie addicts if they're going to take psychedelics, which of course is nonsense, but that's what IRBs do. So you're limited in who you can measure, and you're limited how you can do it. And very often you're measuring things that are of no interest. And as one of the studies recently, very good study, that found very little of what it measured. And in the abstract, the last sentence says, to do this work, you actually need subjects who are depressed if you're measuring changes in depression. So we have a number of studies that have managed not to find something. Fortunately, we have many more studies which have found a great many changes that people find valuable. The other possibility is that hundreds of thousands of people are misled and that several groups of scientists are the only ones who have found out the truth. Both are possible. My vote is always with citizen science.
Yeah, what I can say here is just by assisting several research projects that happened in a clinical environment or in a lab, there seems to be something going on when they take people out of their day-to-day lives, let them stay the whole day in the lab, doing all sorts of tests on a microdose. That gives such a different result than when they take the microdose back home in the middle of their own lives with their own, people around them, their relationships, their work, their study, their creative life. They notice a big difference. But when they're doing the lab work and the study test, they seem to be taken out of context into a different setting. And but science says, no, we got to measure it here because there's a physician present and we're complying with all the rules. We cannot just, have this being studied because those are illegal substances and they have a special permission to do the research only there on location with those conditions. And then the results don't seem to be as present, but also they can do it because of cost limitations. They can do it only one day. So basically they're measuring the effects of microdosing one day with a specific setting that is not very natural. Whereas if you measure it for a month in people, well, they are in their own natural setting, doing their own thing, they report this big difference. So yeah, I think it's also up to science to, advance here and find a better way in which this can be truly studied.
Let's actually have a little more fun with this. Let's go back to high dose psychedelics. Psychedelics, when they were first discovered, or LSD when it was first discovered and became, Sandoz Pharmaceuticals basically said, we don't know how to make money on this. We'll send you some, tell us what you're doing. And I've literally read the instructions, and that's pretty much what it said. And what originally it was called a psychotomimetic, meaning it mimicked psychosis. And how do you mimic psychosis with a beautiful substance like LSD? Well, you make the setting as sterile as possible. You give no support. You give no pre-understanding, like you may find that the walls are breathing and that you're feeling larger than you ever were and so forth. And it was possible, and people were able to do it, is to create such a negative environment that people would have what looked like a psychosis. Okay? Now we learned that that didn't work. And now if you go to every large dose study around the world, the room that the people are taking the substance in looks kind of like a living room. It's got flowers, it's got art, it's got soft furniture. It's a friendly environment. So we learned. The laboratory is for the laboratory. And unfortunately, when all you live in is a laboratory, you have a tendency to think that's how the world looks. Okay? And let me give you a study which we won't do, which would shift a well-known reality of human beings, and probably it would not show up in the laboratory. Now, for instance, I have been told that when people make love, they find it pleasurable, okay? But there's very little measurement of that. However, so I'm setting up a laboratory setting, and people will come in, and we will have a couple of course graduate students who are observing, and maybe some medical students who are on their rotation. And we will have the instruments, you'll be wired, of course, and you'll be observed. There'll be people watching you closely. And we will determine whether this is a pleasure. Well, my guess is this is not going to be a great study because it is applying a model designed for one kind of science in a different way. So there's nothing wrong with it. There are places where the kind of studies that don't work well for psychedelics can be done. But that is the problem that the researchers need to solve. If they want to find out how something works, one of the ways we find out is in context. Biologists, remember, we used to try and save a plant. Then we tried to save the little area around the plant. Now we talk about habitat. that plants and animals and human beings thrive in the correct habitat. They don't thrive in isolation. So it's not science's fault that science only has those tools. And there's a wonderful phrase from Abraham Maslow, which is, if the only tool you have is a hammer, you will treat every problem as if it is a nail. If the only way you know how to measure the effects of a substance is in a laboratory setting, then you're only going to find results that work in a laboratory setting. So what we're doing, and it's quite different, technical term in the literature now is called real world evidence. Real world evidence is talked about in the pharmaceutical industry as the final test of a product, which is, does it work in the laboratory? Does it work on animals? Does it work in the focus group? Does it work well enough so we can get permission to sell it? And then we find out, does it work in the population? And we all know there have been certain pharmaceuticals which were fine up till people started using them. And then they caused such havoc and such destruction that they were withdrawn. So we're coming again from the older model where you start with context, and as Alvaro was saying, the substance is part of the situation. It is not the item.
Alvaro, are there any risks to microdosing ayahuasca while on SSRI antidepressants?
Yes. Well, at least we prefer to say yes, because we don't risk a lot. We prefer not to risk people. We actually have a very strict filter for people who microdose ayahuasca with us. But as some of you know, ayahuasca is quite different from other psychedelics because it interacts with some of with SRIs or other medicine. And that's why we actually, one of these integration elements is medicine or supplements. So we could go deeper into studies with macro doses of ayahuasca, which are the most common. I'm not sure if there's one for microdosing now, but most of them say, okay, you shouldn't take ayahuasca when you're taking some specific medicine for depression or for other things. So we prefer people to be cautious, but we have a team that is now doing some research and experiment, citizen science research, let's say, on people who are currently leaving their medication. So we are with a lot of care, seeing how people stop taking antidepressants and can start taking ayahuasca microdoses, and we have interesting results. I cannot disclose a lot because it's a closed setting for now. But if you ask me, hey, I'm taking antidepressants, can I microdose ayahuasca? My first answer will be let's say no for this difference.
Hello, I'm sorry. So you started to glitch out a little. So if you were saying, if somebody were to ask you if you could microdose ayahuasca while on antidepressants, what would you say? Yeah,
the first thing I will say is, let's not get rushed. My first answer will be no, but let's talk about what your setting is, what your needs are, and we see that in a one-to-one basis. To some people we say no. To some people we say, hey, join our group where we are experimenting with these people leaving antidepressants. But it's actually a very interesting place to further research. So any of you are interested in this kind of things, you have a Peruvian group that can actually use ayahuasca, and we will be very glad to welcome you to research this with us.
The more general question about medications and microdosing, there's a website called microdosingpsychedelics.com, and one of the questions there is, can I microdose with, and then there's a list, and this is a list of medications, supplements, plants, a lot of things that people have written in and said, I was able to microdose successfully with this substance. And there's 180 items on that list. Now, this is not using ayahuasca or Banisteriopsis. Very, very, very seldom. What we've found is that because microdosing really has a very small physiological effect, that most medications one can continue on, but one of the uses that people have, again, created on their own is using microdosing to help them get off medications that either no longer work or the side effects are worse than the effects. And that's a use for microdosing because it seems to not allow people to drop medications, never, but it allows them to taper off medications more easily. And we really don't have many other things that you can go to your physician and say, I've been on this SRI for 8 years. I hate it. Now I'm back to being as depressed as usual. I don't want another SSRI. What can you give me so I can get off this SSRI without serious problems? And the answer is a very, very short list. Microdosing seems to be one of the things that we're now seeing is useful at that point.
Is there a particular psychedelic that is more effective in helping people taper off SSRI antidepressants or other types of antidepressants?
Not from the, maybe, meaning we have a lot of people have used them to get off other substances, and people have found it very easy, and some people have found it very difficult. We haven't really asked that question. It's a good question to ask.
I think I feel pretty confident saying that microdosing could be the number one that helps them to stay off their antidepressants or to stay off their anti-anxiety medication, because it really helps them, it guides them with this inner shift and deal with emotions and yeah, that bit of work, which is basically being postponed in many cases. I'm generalizing a bit, but being postponed while they're on antidepressants. Yeah.
Well, let me give you an example. This is someone who was a student of mine and had become a close personal friend. And he wrote me and he said, I've been on antidepressants for 31 years. Do you think microdosing might help me? And I said, if you're interested in tapering off for some reason, they might help you. And so he went to his physician and explained it. And the first thing his physician said is, well, let's change one of your 2 antidepressants to one which it's easier to taper off. So he was familiar with people who were trying to get off their medications. And over a period of a number of months, he got off one of his antidepressants, and then the other. It was about 6 months before he felt that he was very comfortable without antidepressants. What he then said, and then the reason I'm reminded is the word emotion, he said, all of a sudden I had all my emotions back. And he said it was very awkward because I have been without a full deck of emotions for decades. And he said, one of the problems for my friends, not for me, he says, I cry more often. Now I cry a lot more for happiness than I do for sadness, but I simply sometimes am embarrassing socially because I now have so many emotions and I haven't learned all the control mechanisms that people normally have learned as adults. So then the idea that he's not using microdosing to stay off antidepressants. He has used them to get off and then to recalibrate his body mind. So some people we know stay on a microdose when they're finished with antidepressants or medications. Other people stop when they feel they're fine. And at this point, it's hard to distinguish those 2 groups.
Mm-hmm. Jacobine, how would you compare guided microdosing versus taking it on your own?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. At Microdosing Institute, we started as an information and community platform, education platform. And so we got to see a lot from people who were microdosing on their own. And of course, there were lots of beautiful stories, lots of symptoms that improved or disappeared, or lots of beautiful stories. But there were also a huge amount of people actually who were really focused on, as we said before, like this mindset of, is this going to fix me, yes or no? So they would, for the first couple of days and weeks, they would be focusing and just on that, is it fixing me? Am I feeling better yet? Am I feeling better? Should I take more? Should I take less? So they also stay in that sort of headspace of being very cognitive about it. So actually, and that's actually one of the typical challenges that we came across. So guided microdosing definitely helps with, in the first place, navigating all the challenges and all the challenges that come up also, if it does work for you. So we actually also saw a lot of people who say, yeah, I feel so much better. I have better relationships. My conversations with my partner, I can, like with my children, I have much more patience. I'm not as worried about things. But I also have this, or as Jim said, oh, but now I'm crying a lot. So people tend to like go towards the negative also, like, oh, negative springs up there. So guided microdosing can really help navigating those challenges, and also see what those challenges might mean. Like, what if you are actually your shadow emotions may come up, right? Or that the emotions and the feelings that normally are suppressed, or that you normally don't, or that you actually don't want to have yourself, but somehow they are there. They come more to the surface. It's very typical, because psychedelics are non-specific amplifiers, so they amplify what is already in you. So I think here is the biggest. This is why it's so important to find a good guide or a coach or someone to accompany you. Also to just get more out of it. So the elements we talked about, working with an intention, building that personal relationship with the plant, finding what are the areas in your life that you actually want to improve. So there's this element of coaching as well, looking at your environment. Maybe there are things that are actually not serving me in my surroundings, in my people, in my social life. Perhaps it's my work, perhaps I'm doing things that I'm not passionate about. Like, all of these things, of course, can also come up much more easily. So we have seen with our fully guided program, we have a 6-week program that is fully facilitated with facilitators, one-on-one coaching, group coaching, and partner guides. So you're also working with a partner in the group who's going through their microdosing process. And so you're basically processing together. And also that companionship, that community element, has actually completely blown us away how important that is. So that people actually go through this journey together, trying to achieve something for themselves, and then hearing other people's experience and hearing about the challenges, and also being actually vulnerable and sharing what comes up for them on this journey. That creates so much resonance, that creates so much common ground for people to explore and to feel more connected. And from that connection, it seems that they start to feel more connected to themselves as well, and to the natural world. So this is where, personally, I think is the real magic of this work, if it's done within this context. So with guidance and community. Yeah.
Now, let me flip that around, because what's also now happening is people are going to their therapist and saying, I'm thinking of, or I am microdosing. How do you feel about that? And what we're getting reports from therapists of all persuasions, the overall is people do better in therapy while microdosing. That's a generalization for which I really have almost no exceptions. And I'm thinking of one therapist who wrote an article saying, I don't recommend that my patients microdose, but I do talk to them about it. And I say, well, if you are going to microdose, why don't you be in a microdose state when you come to therapy? Okay, that's a little radical right now, but he was out there. I'm thinking of a different therapist whose clients are very difficult. They have multiple problems, mental and usually physical. And what she said is they simply work better and work faster. So that we're, in a sense, reversing it. So we're saying, you all therapists don't understand microdose coaching, but you are the supportive element. You're the one who's bringing up the hard issues, and you're the one who's supporting them. So again, the context, quote, nobody takes anything alone. Okay. Any more than, it's like, I don't need all this air. I'm just going to breathe what's in my room. It just isn't the way the universe is built. We are connected. And as people create context, coaching is idealized. That's the best you can get. Friends aren't bad. Therapists aren't bad. Very often you'll find if you have children over about the age of 8, they will act as little monitors and let you know how you're doing. There's a wonderful line in Ayelet Waldman's book, A Really Good Day, a woman, serious depression, who microdosed, and she's making breakfast for several of her children before school. And it's her least fun time of day. She doesn't like it at all. But that morning she's singing as she makes breakfast. And her youngest child says, Mom, are you on that drug again? And the answer was yes. So we can never divorce it from context. And again, that's the opposite of the psychopharmacological model.
What does it take to be a good microdosing coach? I'm asking this because I have a number of students that are very interested in learning how to use microdosing as a transformational protocol for their clients. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about, what it would take. Like if you could, give a short list of like, do this, do this, do this. What would it look like to you? Anyone want to take that question?
I don't want to.
I can chime in here.
Oliver.
Yeah, in Microhuasca, we have this, our 6-week program for users, but we also have a training program for facilitators, for practitioners. And the good thing about being here in Peru is that we actually work with practitioners very close with the medicine. They microdose in order to help others. So they, for at least 8 or 12 months, they have continuous microdosing processes. They are, let's say, they facilitate. They have what we and Microdosing Institute, we call them partner guides. So they have a partner, a peer, who they guide. They also guide our users from the 6-week program. And it's very interesting because we actually developed, let's say, I don't know the English word, but the skill sets, the education by skills. And one of the, I think are 20 or 30 skills for a facilitator. One of them is active listening. So you should be able to listen. You should be able, and it sounds easy, right? But actually what we have been talking about a little while ago was, let's say, anciently, the ones who in ayahuasca ceremonies, the ones who took the ayahuasca were the shamans, not the patients. So they took the medicine, they accessed the spirit world, they gather instructions on how to cure this patient, and the patient didn't even took the medicine, right? So we are not doing that in microdosing or in our programs, but actually the way our practitioners relate with the medicine, connect with their users, because they have assigned users through all their training, and the way they connect, it calls me to this ancient practice which has been lost in some places, right? So one of them is being very present, very listening a lot, and not just hearing what they say, connecting. Well, there are a bunch of let's say skills. I might share it later here in the chat box. We have a list that you can see, but probably if you ask me for one, that's the one. to connect and to listen, which is not as easy as it sounds.
So I'd love to ask this question of each of you because you all have you all are doing this work in your own unique ways. And so in the course of the research that you've been doing, I'd love to hear what other methods have you seen or implemented that had results that surprised you? Maybe we can start with Jim.
Oh my, I live on surprises. But I can't say techniques or methods, but one of the things that I'm continually surprised is when someone says, I've been microdosing with or without coaching, and the following has happened. Let me give one that I find, I like to disturb medical audiences. So here's a case. Now, this comes from one of the very fine American coaches, Adam Brandage, Flow State Micro. He has a client who he's coaching, and she has been on insulin medication for diabetes for, I think, 14 years. Steady, stable, controlled insulin, same amount. She was microdosing not to deal with her insulin levels or her diabetes. She had other interests, other concerns. But after a month of microdosing, she was aware that she kept cutting her insulin down. And after a month or so, she was using 20% of her dose. Okay? Now, what's wonderful about that is we don't know much with a lot of medicine, and certainly not with mental conditions. But we're pretty clear that we know what causes diabetes. We know what happens, what part of the body is not functioning, what cells are not producing. It's all fairly physical. And we also know that insulin supports the body back to a normal functioning, okay? So there's no reason that a psychedelic would lower insulin levels, except when it does, okay? That's a surprise.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Yaksin?
That's a profound surprise because it breaks apart several of the theories that modern medicine is based on. How's that?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. What about you, Jacobine?
Yeah, gosh, I'm just thinking about what really surprised me. I think there's two things. One is a surprise and one is more like potential. I hope to see a lot of surprises in that. But the first one is, so we also really want to, so our main program is with psilocybin, and we felt that we, just like they do at Microwaska, and I think every psychedelic practitioner or retreat center or should find ways to really co-create and integrate indigenous wisdom and indigenous healers and practitioners into their work. And we are very proud and happy to work with Sochil Ashi. She's also, I think she was on today also with you here. And people love it so much. Not just her teachings on how to build a relationship with this ancestral medicine, but also what is ancestral medicine and what does that mean for no matter where you are in the world. So you don't have to be in Peru close to the tradition, or in Brazil, or in Mexico. Doesn't matter where you are. Everyone who is part of these teachings really takes them and really starts to cultivate their own relationship with psilocybin, actually just creating a ritual around it, starting to engage with it and realize we're all part of Mother Nature. We're all part of this same, there's a shared consciousness, there's a wisdom, there's a higher wisdom that we can actually, and this is my ally. And it starts with honoring my ancestors and the nature, everything that made us today here where we are in this, wonderful life, which is actually a miracle to be alive in this exact moment and to do all the things we can do, even though there's hardship too, but to appreciate that, to honor all of that has to happen to make this possible. And within that honoring and that gratitude, from there, people start to see their own truth and their own power and their own inner wisdom. And from there, they start to create. This is something that I think is also a shift for microdosing. That this whole dynamic, and that's also a reason. It works so well on people, even people who said, I came here for the neuroplasticity and for the new neural pathways, and I wanted to be more creative, but they somehow all end up building that relationship with the ancestral medicine and with nature and their ancestors, and they become much more conscious creators, which, I think is just fantastic. So, but again, I really also hope we can really integrate the indigenous people more into this work, because this whole shift is happening worldwide, and what they are, their visibility is still like such a small, it's so marginal still. So hopefully we can amplify that as well. And then the other small thing that I wanted to actually say, which is what I'm hoping for, is we see also how people benefit from being connected. They feel very connected, not just microdosing in community, but also with the specific sub-community that they are part of. So people with ADHD, for instance, they find a lot of support in those other peers who also have it. We have a lot of excited seniors, people who are slightly older and kind of rediscovered microdosing or psychedelics, and they all team up and start gathering. And I think so. I think in this way we can have smaller communities that microdose together, and like veterans. There's Veterans Walk and Talk. They started in San Diego, where they do microdosing walks every Sunday, which is very healing, very connecting. And so that's, what else? People with autism, there's a wonderful project. They also come online together every Sunday evening, I believe. So this is really where I think, group healing, I think that's going to be the next thing.
So again, what we're all saying is microdosing is the pivot upon which a lot of other work happens. And I want to comment, there was something in the chat room that is my fault, where I had no idea that microdosing could lower insulin levels. We have no idea if microdosing lowers insulin levels. What we do know is microdosing leads to healthier cells being created. We do have that research on individual neurons. They create better neurons. We don't know to what extent microdosing affects various physical symptoms, because it affects the entire body. So we have no idea whether this woman that I mentioned is a miracle, is an exception, was taking too much insulin all the way around, who knows? But what we do know is it raises the question of looking at the whole system, not at an individual organ or an individual muscle. The wonderful thing is when you go to a gym, they usually say, what would you like? And you say something, I want to lose weight, I want to have stronger arms. And they say, well, here's some exercises that will be for your whole body. And you say, well, but I came in with these special interests. They say, your whole body actually will work this out better than if we focus on a part. And what I'm hearing from Jacobin is your whole body includes the people around you. There's a phrase which is sometimes as a joke, it takes a village, as it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to do practically anything. And that's why humanity evolved in little villages. Cities only happened after agriculture. And it was basically, what do you do with the excess? So we're returning with the help of our indigenous friends to what seemed to help not only the people, but the ecosystem they lived in. And it's very, very, very rare to find an indigenous group that harms its own ecosystem. Not impossible, but we've noticed when these groups get a little apart from nature that they destroy the ecosystem. Microdosing is about the ecosystem of people who are involved in microdosing. It's not about substances. That's why these coaching models, remember, nobody asked for a coaching model. What Jacobin has pointed about is it arose because people found it worked better than not.
Right. Thank you so much for sharing your immense research and wisdom and knowledge around this topic. I want to just pop over to the QA room here. We've got a couple of questions, and then we're going to wrap up. So the first question is directed to you, Jim, wondering how you mitigate risks for users on the IMA that take an advice on how to treat a migraine from your earlier example. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this advice is anecdotal, coming from the person, if served, and might not serve the patient, vulnerable person asking, in parentheses. If it ends up making them worse, is there a way where you can keep track of these results and feedback? Thank you.
Well, there's a curious problem with microdosing and things getting worse. Most people, if they're at all sane, if they're taking something that makes them feel worse, they stop. Okay? You ever been to a restaurant that your friends loved and whatever you ate made you sick? You don't go back. You don't keep going back because your friends like it. So we don't get enough of the negative feedback that we need, but we are learning something. And this is the World, I guess the World Drug Survey, Global Drug Survey, surveyed microdosing, and they found that a certain number of people who were microdosing found it fine, and a certain percentage quit. And what they looked at is, of the people who quit, a large number simply never got advice or support, and found that either their schedule was wrong or their dosing was wrong. Let me give you an example from very early days when we didn't know much. I got an email that said, I'm microdosing and I have these problems. And it was headaches and nausea and pain and sleep problem. It was awful. And I wrote back and said, my best advice to you is to stop. And he wrote back, I love this, he says, you can't make me. I said, wait a moment. I said, I'm a researcher and a human being, and it isn't working for you. I urge you to stop. See, with email, you don't know where in the world you're talking to or what age or so forth. So silence for several days. And then I got an email that said, I cut my dose in half, all my symptoms went away. That's what coaching is for. So we find that people who do not benefit from microdosing and have negative experiences, very often it's a problem of dose and of environment. I remember a couple who said, I really want to microdose. And then they told me that they just lost their apartment, they'd lost their jobs, and their cat was sick. I said, I don't think this is a great time to microdose. They said, well, we want to. And I got a note a week later that said, you were right, we stopped. So microdosing doesn't have a large effect, especially one single dose. And negative events basically are, they're a big red flag that say, don't do this. And so we have a few indications of where there's a problem. And this is something that I really just learned from Jacobin a few months ago, which is a number of people who microdose report tinnitus, the ringing in your ears. Most of them, when they stop microdosing, the tinnitus goes away. For people with tinnitus, and it's a very distressing condition because there's sound all the time, it's a little worse when they microdose, at least the ones we talk to. And so it also seems to go back down when they go off microdosing. So we don't quite know what's going on, but we mentioned to people that's a concern. And if they had tinnitus beginning, at the moment, the recommendation is to stop. So that's how we're learning about the negatives, is by people, citizen scientists, basically trying things out, and it doesn't work for them.
Another question from the audience. Has microdosing been used with people suffering from dementia, and what was the outcome? Can anybody take this?
If you guys won't, I will. Oh, we have, so again, we don't have, quote, research, meaning a lot of people in one laboratory, but we have a number of stories, and the most common story, and we're really looking at this is right at the edge of where we are, is people with dementia, and I have a very nice report, come out of their dementia a lot for a number of hours. This is one story, this is the father of a rather famous American musician. And the father at this point sits on the couch, doesn't speak, and has dementia. His son decides, I'm going to play the music that my father used to like, but I'm going to microdose him first. And so he microdoses him and he starts to play. This is a jazz musician family, and he plays music that the father used to like. After a while, the father starts to pay attention to the music. He's now tapping to the music, and he begins to sing along, according to his son, with some of the really difficult lyrics. Okay? This goes on for about 6 hours. The rest of the family where he's been living are astounded because he hasn't been focused, attentive, emotionally expressive for a long time. And then the microdose effects, whatever they are, diminish, and he doesn't improve, quote, from dementia, but he had, what we know is there's a lot more of him left in there than dementia would let you think. So this is really a very edge area, and it's a great question. And I put this to both of all of us here and to everyone on the chat. If you know of anything about this, let us know, because that's one of the areas we're exploring.
Amazing. We're at the end of our time together. Thank you so much. I'd love to ask how the audience can best stay in touch with you. Let's start with Jacobine.
Yeah, people can check our website, microdosinginstitute.com, or our Instagram, Microdosing Institute. We also have a Discord community and a Facebook community to find that community of other microdosers. Yeah, and let's pass it to everybody, and then we should also mention the IMA, so the Microdosing Association.org.
Right. Alvaro?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can reach out to microhuasca.com. You can see that we have new programs in English. We have been working in Spanish for a while now. So you can meet us there. You can meet us in Instagram as well. And of course, as we will say later about the IMA, we welcome everyone who wants to reach out, who wants to experiment in Peru with a legal framework, let's say. So we are very open to everyone, microdosing professionals or not.
So,
and Jim,
I'm not a microdosing coach. I have a degree in psychology that I'm only now and then ashamed of, but I do collect stories. And so if you write me at my email, jfadiman@gmail.com, all little letters, I will appreciate your stories. Should you ask me the forbidden question, this is the United States again, where can I get some? I will answer that you should ask your friends. If you say, will you help me? The answer is no, but I might be able to recommend a coach to you. So you have to understand, I'm more the kind of influencer. I'm kind of the voice of microdosing in some way, but I am not the practice of microdosing. It has gone way beyond me, and that's why I'm so excited to be on this panel with several of my most important teachers.
Amazing. So thank you so much again for your time, for your presence, your knowledge, all the research and work that you're doing. I'm tremendously grateful for you. And I look forward to the possibility of one day meeting each and every one of you in person. Thank you so much again. I want to wish you a beautiful rest of the day, wherever you are. Bye for now.
All right.